to the exact price that we needed. I was blown away, first of all, that you could be that far off to be, and it was obvious that he was off, that far off, and then totally go the other way. Like where it's the same comps that he could have had access to. So
right. I had an appraiser today because a listing went like 25 over list price, but he said, how many offers did you get? And, you know, to paint the picture, there was 15, but then he said, did the winning offer escalate to that amount, or did they just write it at that amount? And I thought, I don't know how I'm supposed to answer that to give me the best chance that you just make it appraised for the 185 it's supposed to. I didn't know which is worse.
yeah,
If they just overshot it from the beginning or they got teased into it. I don't know if either's the right answer. So I think I just said, I don't remember. About half of them escalated, half didn't. I don't, you know, there was 15 offers. It was hard to remember, but I don't know what he was trying to pry to get out of me.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
yeah. Who knows? It's you would just, you know, the answer could be, hey, we put a bunch of numbers in a bowl and we pulled one out. This is the one we got.
That one on Rockbrook Road, did that get a bunch of offers you were competing against?
They had 3 offers that were verbal and coming in, and the seller actually knew our buyer and wanted to sell to them.
Oh, cool.
So yeah. Right.
Nice work.
Yeah. Well, but it needs a lot of work.
Yeah, a ton, like a lot of windows, like all of them that exist in the house.
They're probably gonna flip it.
Oh, really? I kind of wondered if that at the end of it all could be like an $800,000 house, just because it probably has it in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Should be cool. Yeah, that was Teresa Elliott. She's very nice to do a deal with. I've never, or years ago, maybe I did something with her, but she's got a great system and a good team set up.
My buyers were scared that they wanted you to close on it like in 30 days and then rent it back to like September or something.
Yeah.
And then we met the seller who came home during the showing, and she was really frazzled and seemed not very collected. It all felt kind of chaotic.
It was.
And my buyer said, if that's the person who's my tenant living in this house for 4 months, like the seller kind of ruined it. It was funny just because she was acting so goofy, and she's your tenant for 4 months, and they didn't like that with that seller. It was just kind of interesting and that turned them away.
That is not surprising. Our buyers knew her, so they probably understood. Plus our buyers were the medical people who saved her child's life. So there was like that, like how do you even like compete against that? You know, I didn't even know if they wanted the house, but she wanted them to have it. So yeah, you know, it's you picked up on probably some important vibes.
I think so.
Yeah. It's a cool house on a great lot. The whole thing was really, really cool. So, but yeah, lots of work to do. I'm not sure how many people are coming. Did we get any kind of RSVP?
No.
Nope.
And I didn't hear back from anybody either, Carol.
Okay. So we'll have to take care of that later, Tim.
Yeah, I was already thinking about that.
Yeah. Are you eating popcorn?
It's my lunch.
And so why don't we get started to just respect everybody's time. And Ben, thanks so much for joining us. Jackie is actually the only one from our new class, and then Kathy's from our last class. So welcome to both of you. Thank you for showing up. And Ben, if you've already watched the video that Ben did, Ben is one of our most effective loved agents in our company. I think that would be a good description. He's an epitome of somebody who serves his clients really, really well. And Ben used to be a teacher, so he has a teacher's heart, which is really what many of all of you, many people are bringing that to the table, which is great. And I want you to talk about just the most important things with that first buyer contact, buyer interview. And I know this stuff was on the video, but and we don't have 12 people to ask questions, so we'll try and feed you some questions if you need us to. And Jackie, you should have 1,000 questions to ask him. Well, here comes one of the mentors. So the mentors are also invited onto these meetings every week. So Ben, I'm gonna let you take it and go from here. If you want to do a little bit of intro of your kind of the time that you've been doing mentoring, the time you've had your license, and just basically what you're going to talk about and how you want to run this. So
that sounds great. I've had my license for this is my 8th year. I was a special education school teacher before this, and I hope I sell real estate for the rest of my life. I think it's the right thing for me to do. Last year was a particularly banner year for me. I helped 100 families either buy or sell a house. So I sold 45 this year. So I might be close to the same pace, but whatever the number is just the right amount for me. A lot of people ask me, new agents and things like, why is what you do different than what we're doing, or what's better? Or I even had a college student come shadow me the other day and very quickly decided, I don't want to see this many people every day in my life. And like, I showed her, I thought I was demonstrating perfect day in real estate. And she's like, can I stop at 5 and not go visit people's houses and have to be forced into conversations? And then we saw 3 people I knew in the same coffee shop and had to chat with each. She's like, that's just not the job for me. But anyways, so I end up telling people a lot about real estate. And I've come to the conclusion what allows me to sell greater than my fair share is how quickly people have learned to, or have seen the character that I have and are willing to trust me. And some of that it doesn't happen quickly. It just happens of a long time of people observing me. But when a person goes from a friend or a family member or an acquaintance or a peer or a gym mate, however I know them, and they become a client, the conversations that we have or the life that they've watched me live and the interactions, they come basically on the cusp of saying, we don't know anything about this, but we know that you do, and we'll do anything that you tell us to. Like, we totally trust you and the things that you've done. And so what I'll tell people sometimes, agents who are thinking about it, is I think the real currency that we are like trading and what we are selling and getting paid for is our reputation and our character and being totally trustworthy. It's not that I have better photography than anyone else, or I use the pre-inspection more effectively than anyone else, or I give the best pop-bys or write the best notes, though I do think I do all of those well. I just think people trust me totally inherently, and I've earned it after a long time of living a certain way and helping clients a certain way. And so I sort of think that is the greatest. We get hired because of our reputation and knowing we're going to put our client's interest ahead of our own. And so I think that's just 100 people said, I know there's 3,000 realtors I could pick, but the way you treat people and the way I know you're going to care about me and the character you'll bring to this, like, I just wouldn't want anyone else to do it for me and my family except for you. So I think if there's anything, Brian Buffini talks about that, your character and your competency. Can you do things well? And do you have the character? And it takes a long time to build character and takes not very long to ruin it. And then Brian Buffini also says, most people, when they're hiring somebody, will ask themselves 3 questions. Do I like you? Can I trust you? And are you good at what you do? And I just think I've been able to have people trust me who don't even really know me yet. But to get this more focused, that buyer appointment that I'm such a big fan of is how I take a person who knows my character and says, hey, you're a trustworthy person, but I don't know anything about real estate, and I need to bring them up to speed so that they are willing to do all the proper things the buyer should do in order to successfully buy a house. So they came to me because they already trust me, but I do need to do a lot of teaching so that they'll do all the right things. The one thing I have found, it's almost comical this year, is I don't think I'm brazen about it, but I definitely have way more confidence in just telling a person, if you want to buy a house, these are the unwritten rules of, and I did this yesterday. They said, can we even buy a house? I said, well, here's what it generally takes. And we know the rules, though they're not written down. It's 10 or 20 over list price. It's cover a bunch of the difference if it doesn't appraise. It's don't clean the house. You can live there for a week after I close on it. And I probably am not going to do a home inspection. I don't like that those things are going on, but I recognize that every house I've sold basically this year is a listing. The winning buyer did all of those things. And on a whole host of the homes that I've sold with the buyer has done most of those things. And it's kind of a victory when they don't have to throw out the home inspection. And I'm ready for that not to be the case. But I sort of think more than ever, we need to find a way to, like, kindly and in an encouraging way, let people know, unless you want to do all of those things, plus sprinkle in a few more things that don't help you and only help the seller, it's just, we're going to have a really hard time buying the great house you know you're going to be attracted to. So I don't know, has anyone had any issues having that enhanced version of setting expectations to say, without telling them you can't have a home inspection, you kind of can't have a home inspection, and you kind of need to ask your dad if he's going to give you $20,000 because you might need it if this appraisal is low, and you might be comfortable letting someone live in your house and you pay their utilities and the list goes on and on. It's just, you didn't have to, it wasn't so harsh last year or years before. That the spirit of setting expectations is there, but it's just, the stakes are much higher. So has anyone had difficulty now that the stakes are so high in getting a buyer to be willing to do that after meeting you for 1 hour? Because that's the secret of the buyer appointment. They get to that point in 1 hour's time, but it's maybe more difficult than ever. So I'm just curious what you think about that.
Ben, I've had people, I've had those same conversations, and these buyers that I don't know well, and the buyers that I do know well, they don't like to hear it, and they don't necessarily believe it until after they've written an offer that goes against what I recommended. So of course I always leave it up to them and to, craft the offer, and I just give them my recommendations. But it seems like after a handful of times where they get denied, then they're like, okay, Rhonda, let's do it your way. Like, okay, let's try it my way. And then I don't want to say I've always won, but that's when I see success for my clients.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you think it's a work in progress with any of the newer buyers, that the whole idea of no inspection, because they've been listening to their parents and their friends, and there's all the don'ts,
Mhm.
don't do this, don't bid too much, don't buy a house without an inspection. You've got that thing in their ear, and I usually address that with them when I first talking to them about all the chatter. It's no different than during political campaigns, and you hear all of this stuff. This is why you're working with me, with us, is because we are going to be your trusted advisor. And it's hard right now to actually not question yourself being a trusted advisor when you are saying to them, and this was a huge conversation this last week's conference that I was in, and Tim was in too. We were in different ones, but the same thing, is that so many agents, and long-term agents as well as, I think you're better off being a short-term agent where you're a little more cautious and less risky. is losing confidence in that you're really giving them the right advice. Because if you're building a relational business 2 years from now, you want those people to have a good thought of you and the experience, not the, oh shit, I bought this house, I moved in, everything fell apart, it's been a money pit, blah, blah, all those kinds of things. So, yeah, I think people should ask you questions, and they should push back, and we should be able to acknowledge that and not have them step too much farther until they feel comfortable. And you're right, Rhonda. They all, they either give in or they go away.
Yeah.
I think there's a real strategic way to tell a person the things they pretty much have to do to buy a house without telling them, I'm demanding you do these things when you write your offer, because I want them to choose to take on some of these risks. But usually the conversation goes at some point, of course, they say, man, I heard it's so crazy, or do homes really go over this price, or my neighbor just sold without a home inspect. They know it's crazy, and thankfully they introduce the topic to me. So I'll always tell people, I'll just tell you how most of the homes that I have sold for a seller have sold this year, because then it even takes me out of I've made buyers do these things. It's just, here's how my listings have sold this year, and it's been plenty of them with multiple offers. The winning buyer that my seller picks their offer generally is doing these things. And of course, it's the 20 over, cover the difference, don't clean the house, buyer will pay for termite inspection, treatment if needed, no inspection. And of course, I have all mine be pre-inspected. So that's like a little cheating there, because in any market over the last 4 years, a pre-inspected listing generally didn't have a buyer have an inspection. But I'll just tell my own buyers, here's how all my listings have sold. And that's the way, I'm just telling them the winning buyer does these things. They're smart enough to realize if they want to be a winning buyer, then they'll have to do all those things too. But I very explicitly will tell people, because I think I'm okay if someone overpays for the house because they know their dad's going to give them the money and they're going to live there forever. Like, that doesn't give me as much concern as the buyer who gives up a home inspection and then something really, terrible or tragic. I think we actually have some liability there. A person who's excited and pays more for something than the next person, I just don't think we're at much risk for not taking care of our clients. But the inspection obviously is a tough issue. So I just real explicitly will tell people, here's what I have observed, and I really don't like it, but I know it goes on every single day, that many transactions, sometimes the majority of real estate sales, occur with a buyer not having a home inspection. Then I always say, I'm really, really ready for that to go away. I'm hoping there's going to be a little reprieve, just to the point that it doesn't threaten a person's ability to buy a house when you have an inspection. But for right now, it just exists every single day. And I really, really, really don't like it. I will never tell you not to have a home inspection. You'll never hear me say those words. Those are not good words I should ever say to a client. But I just recognize homes sometimes are only bought without an inspection. And they get what I'm saying, but I really want them to know I said it's not a great idea and I'm not happy about it, but it goes on. And then of course it comes to, go ahead, Carol, sorry.
No, I just repeating, it's how you win.
Oh.
Yeah, I love your approach to that. Here's what the winning buyers look like. I think that's an excellent approach.
I have a question.
Good.
Was that Jackie? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just interesting to hear you talk, because so much of this is very much like a social work background or a therapist background. You kind of guide them, but at the end of the day, they have to make their own choices and their own decisions. But in relation to how you say to clients, based on my experience, of course, when you're new, I can't say based on my experience. What do you suggest handling that as a new agent?
Good question.
Right. Kristen, you have an answer and I'll think of my answer.
Yeah, I have an answer. I've got a mentee right now who is new, and she's had her license for 2 years, but she's just now getting action. And so the way that I told her, I suggested for her to say this was, what we have been seeing, and just say, you know, what we have been seeing as realtors, what we have been seeing on the market, rather than saying in my professional or in my experience, what we have been seeing will help you because you're hearing it from all the other experienced agents who are actively doing it, but you're not lying and saying, well, what I have seen, because you don't have that experience yet, and you've got to start somewhere. So tacking yourself onto other agents and what we collectively have been seeing, that helps. And you can even use your mentee or mentor as an example. Well, I know that this particular agent has seen blah, 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 you know, and I've been helping her with this and however you want to do it. But that has really helped my mentee feel stronger about this and being able to say, well, what we've been seeing. And it makes her feel more confident talking to that person without having to betray the fact or, you know, show that she doesn't have that experience. Does that make sense? Okay.
No,
Yeah.
that
Thank you.
verbiage is really excellent. The funny thing is, I have way more confidence now in saying, here's what another agent told me. And I'm using someone else as like the cheat to say, well, this is what I heard. But I would have lacked confidence to say that early on. But the funny thing is, I'm still passing the buck a lot of times to another agent. I just think I am more confident in doing it. But I don't know why this year more than ever in the past, or maybe I just developed a good or bad habit. I'll just say anecdotally or as some anecdotal evidence. That doesn't mean I've tested it. I've just anecdotally, someone told me, or I'm hearing these from peers. Anecdotally, I'll even say, you know, my peer just had this happen. Or do you feel like it's slowing down? And I say, I don't know, one of my peers just had a listing that sold with only 3 offers. That's not even really an answer that confirms or denies, but sometimes it's nice just to say, I'm exhausted doing all the things I do. I've given you everything I know, but this just happened to one of my peers. So I think it's not passing the buck. I think it is relying on other professionals and I do it more than ever now. It's just I have confidence in doing it, in sharing what happened to one of my peers. So Kristen.
It also really shows how we collaborate as a brokerage in knowing that you have that behind you. You can come to any one of us and use any one of us within the brokerage, not just the people on the screen, and say, what are you seeing right now? Talk to all of your fellow agents who have some more experience and get their opinion of the current market, find out how they want to talk, how they talk to their clients, and use that. But having that collaborative aspect within our brokerage will also help boost your confidence. It did for me, and I came over with 5 years experience.
I think you need to lean into the power of exactly what Kristen's talking about, what Ben's talking about. Lean into the power of the team and of the fact that you have a mentor. You know, it's really hard to, when somebody says, how long have you been in the business? How long have you been in real estate? You're like, 3 weeks, I think. You don't have to answer that. You know, you can be the politician. You do the politician answer. You don't really answer the question. You just give information that kind of satisfies the fact that somebody did ask the question. But I would definitely lean into just any one of those statements. The leader, you know, if you're on a team, you know, the leader of our team, we had a team meeting, and many of the people on our team have experienced the same thing, which is you know, you're then a part of this team.
I think when I watch the Buffini videos and he talks about new agents, worst fear is having a client or customer say, oh, how long have you been doing this? Yes. Because nobody ever wants to step up and say, oh yeah, I've been here for 3 weeks, so I'm pretty.
But do you remember that whole statement that he said?
Yes, it was basically saying, you know, relatively new, but I'm really excited. I have a great team or support system around me. I have tons of agents I can ask questions who know all this information, and I'm ready to help you, kind of thing. It was the selling yourself.
It's perfect. You picked up all the points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just said that very, very well.
Yeah,
I
he
mean, I
did-
know
he
you
did,
just
didn't he?
repeated what you watched, but that
Yeah.
came across extremely naturally.
Yeah.
And you did it in a very unnatural time, like as a role play. So that was really good, I thought.
Yeah, it was almost verbatim because he says, well, I'm fairly new to the business, but I'm fired up and I'm excited. And I am only one phone call away from people with years and years of experience. And I can ask questions. And saying, an answer to somebody's question when you go like, your whole life passes before you when they ask you something is, you know what? That's an excellent question. Let me get back to you. I want to give you the answer based on, I'm going to call a couple people that I really trust and who've been doing this for a long time. So
yeah, that's actually one of my biggest fears. When I met Tim, I told him this, and it's always been this fear in my working background was people who are incompetent. And I guess what I mean by that is incompetence doesn't mean you don't know the information. Incompetence is not returning people's phone calls and not trying to find the information. So for me, that's a huge fear of people thinking I'm incompetent. So I've always been very much about, I'm not sure of that answer, but I'm definitely going to find out and get back to you because I'm interested in that answer as well. So that scares the shit out of me for some reason, is people thinking that I'm dumb and that I'm incompetent. So it's always,
I think worse.
fairly good about trying to find answers for people. So
I think worse is people who answer questions that are not necessary. They're not necessarily giving the right answers. Is an overconfidence in their competence that they're afraid to not have anything to say, or to say, let me get back to you is probably one of the best things you could say. And if they start getting used to the fact that what you say you're going to do, they will start to trust you. And that's what you're building, is trust. So I
always follow up.
Yeah.
One of the things that I do, because I still get questions, just like Ben, we started the same year. I'm going into my 8th year right now. I still get questions where I'm like blown away. I have no idea what the answer is. And I'll say exactly what Carol said. That's a great question. I'm honestly not sure. Let me get some information on that and get back to you. It doesn't hurt, I love to talk. I absolutely love to talk. Anybody who knows me knows that I love to talk. And as we're going through the house, we talk, our clients, I become friends with my clients, and I have no problem saying, this is the craziest thing. I learn something new every day and with every transaction. That is what I love about this business, because there's always something to learn. It's not monotonous and it's never boring. But yeah, what I'm doing, if I'm in a showing and I'm comfortable with these people, I can text whoever I need to and say, hey, what is the answer to this? And get right back to them while you're doing the showing, or in between houses. You can call your mentor in the car, get the answer, and then say, I got some information for you. This is what I've learned. Just try to get that information as soon as possible, because they'll know that you're on it, you're serious, and it builds that trust, like Carol said.
One of the things that I learned when I was a newer agent, it's all about fake it till you make it. And you're already surrounded by good people. And you, Jackie, already just showed that you can talk on your feet and you can work your way through any uncomfortable thing. There is a TED Talk. I don't remember the woman's name, but her title is Fake It Till You Make It. And she's very successful and she's done very well in life. And a lot of it was her jumping into things, not knowing everything, but just faking it. And it was all about attitude and persona and how she put herself out there. And it's a really great one. I would Google that. So anyway.
It does feel like you're totally faking it early on when you say, I don't know. I say the same things that I don't know, but it's actually genuine and honest, and I don't feel like I'm on trial. So it's just funny, what is so scary to say, and you're like, I can't wait till I don't have to feel this way or say those words. You'll always use those words. You'll just feel way better using it. That's kind of I'll tell people, I just won't give you a good answer to that right now. Or can I answer that later? And they're like, oh yeah, it sounds fine. I mean, we're still doing it. We just feel good about saying it, and you feel like you're on trial if you use those words. Sometimes it's just how you feel going into it. I did want to talk about. Oh, go ahead, Carol. Maybe.
I just wanted to add one thing. A lot of buyers, particularly first-time home buyers, they ask a lot of questions because somebody told them they needed to ask those questions. Not necessarily because they even care about what the answer is, but make sure that they've been told to. So the fact that you've now like put them on hold and then no matter what, get back to them quickly. That's the most important, is they're giving you an opportunity for a dress rehearsal. No matter what, get back to them with something. So.
And that's a great point, Carol. Sometimes, yeah, they ask a question because it just feels like they're obligated to ask you things and they really don't care about what you say. Like when the seller who says, have you sold anything in my neighborhood? And I want to be like, there's like 3,000 neighborhoods in Omaha, and I've sold a wonderful 500 homes or whatever in my career. So no, like, I mean, it's just funny that they think that's important. Of course, I don't say that. I'll say, oh yeah, in the area. Or I might even be honest and say, oh, not in Cedar Ridge, which is this neighborhood I was in the other day. It like has 100 houses, But sometimes I'll just say, is that important to you? Oh, no, not at all. Just was kind of curious. I mean, or how long have you been in business? Oh, 8
Sellers do
years.
that.
Yeah, sellers.
Well,
Is
when they
the
ask
length of
about-
time?
yeah. They ask
Is
about
the
your,
length of time? Oh, go ahead, Carol.
when the seller asks about what's your commission, and you tell them, and they say, is that negotiable? And you say no, and they're like, okay, that's fine. And then I'll say, no, let me talk to you. I don't care. Like somebody told me I'm supposed to ask that.
Right.
So it's not just buyers. Go ahead.
Right. Oh, just the same, the length of time, how long have you been in the business? I'll say I've had my license for 8 years. Is the length of time I've had a real estate license important to you? Sometimes just right back at them. Oh, no, not at all. I'm like, okay. I mean, it's just funny. People just, they just word vomit questions. One thing I did want, Kathy's leaving, going to do something. So have a great time doing that. Airport pickup. I did want to talk about strategically how to help a person come to the conclusion to give up a home inspection. I mean, I hate to teach a lesson on how to convince a person not to have a home inspection. But again, I recognize in order to buy a house, sometimes you have to not have a home inspection. I mean, I think it just goes on every day. And so buyers will say, like, how do people give up a home inspection? Or my dad said that's so dumb. Or, they just kind of want to wrap their mind around it. And I think we have to give them as much guidance as we can to let them wrap their minds around the idea, but then they finally make the leap. And I hate when agents, I shouldn't say hate. Some agents will say, eventually they'll learn. It's just going to take a few. Well, what I hear is 20 showings, one offer you lost, 20 showings, another offer you lost. Well, in 4 months from now, in 200 hours, they've learned, but you also you lost 200 hours of your time you could have used for fun and frolic and family and helping other clients and things. Is there a way to take the 200-hour commitment and bring it into a single hour of conversation? And again, that's why the buyer appointment is so important. But on the topic of how do I give up a home inspection, some of those things, because I've guided people to do that as comfortably as possible this year. And I will always tell them, I always take it off of me and them. And I say, I think the way a buyer gives up their home inspection is they start to pay attention to the real expensive things or the major components of the house. Like, hey, this house we're in right now, we know the roof's 2 years old. The mechanicals are, each 10 years old. They've redid the kitchen. The siding was just painted. The windows are new. All of those things are the real expensive parts of the house. The foundation looks great. We saw no cracks. If all those things are relatively new, what you're left with is the little annoying things that an inspector would have found. And they're going to exist in every house, a little plumbing, this or that, or the window stuck. But all these really expensive things, which we can go look at, are all totally new. And that is how a buyer is comfortable not having a home inspection, because they know whatever is wrong is like hundreds or a couple thousands of dollars, not $6,000 and $10,000 at a time, because all of those items are real expensive. So that's what I'll talk people through. And then the other flip to that is, what if the furnace is 38 years old and the air conditioner is 38 years old? then they're kind of like, I need to have an inspection because these aren't new. On the last house, everything was new. I mean, I think it's sensible to say an inspector is not going to tell you anything more or less than this furnace is 38 years old. It's clearly working because it's 60 degrees outside and it's more comfortable in here than outside. It's way past its statistical useful life, which we've talked about, the age of furnaces in other homes. So I think if you send an inspector out there, they would tell you, you should budget for a replacement because this thing's 38 years old. Anything else right and wrong with that furnace probably doesn't matter because you need to replace it. As you know, you're going to need to replace it. So I think that, to flip that, if something is as broken as it could possibly be, I don't think you need to pay $500 to be told it's broken and it needs to be replaced. Like, there's no more mysteries to be uncovered. And so that's kind of the other flip. And I'm comfortable saying that, but like, I'm not an expert on windows and what if there's a life left and there's repair to make, first replacement, but some things are just cut and dry. They're too old to go on much longer. You will replace this in the next few years, but you know that going into it. So then at least a buyer might feel comfortable if everything else is okay. These items are deficient and old, but we're not going to learn anything more or less. And then they say, okay, I'm okay not having home inspection. So does that feel, if it gets to it where you can't get a house without a buyer committing to that conversation, you'd feel good about having? Because I don't tell them to do it. I just tell them how a buyer comes to terms with it. And some buyers say, I'm just not ready yet. And I say, I don't blame you. I really don't even like we have to think about these things. But kind of inevitably, they come to the conclusion, this next house they love so much, they'll do anything it takes to buy it. And that includes sensibly giving up the home inspection if everything checks out and we take a good look at it. But how do you feel about that conversation, about that topic, and how you could have it? Because it's a real thing. We have to have those conversations.
Are you asking me specifically?
No, I think I was looking at Rhonda actually, because she's right in the middle of my eyes right there. But I was asking everybody.
I do have like if you have a buyer, you know, the house in your opinion looks fine, or you have the roof looks old. You know, the roof is 20 years old, and it looks, you know, you've got some of the things are flipping up, and you see
Shingles curling.
definitely questionable. And the buyer says, you know, I really want to have a roof inspection, or at least have somebody up on the roof to give me some guidance here. Are you still putting that in, or are you still kind of saying, I mean,
those are the ones that make me most nervous, because it could be 10 years old, but it's broken and the insurance isn't going to cover it. I mean, I don't think I've had that one peg me down exactly where it's like there's a ticking time bomb on the roof and we're going to just buy it like it is. You know, to say, a buyer would say, could I just have a roof inspection instead of a home inspection? Would the seller be okay with that? Well, probably not. I mean, the seller would rather you just buy it with no inspection. I'm not telling them to do that, but I just rationalize. There might be a buyer whose dad's a roofer and they don't care because they have the inside scoop on fixing it. Sometimes I'll even say that, like, some person might let that go because they can fix it on their own, but I guess I would minimize the inspection down to just the roof. Or have they had an insurance company look at it recently? Can we get some information from the seller that might allow us to not pursue it on our own? I just had one and the seller said, I know you want an inspection. We had one done 3 years ago. Can we give you that? And that might, you know, you're okay not having an inspection. And so we got the report and we went back to the house, and the buyer said, hey, probably not a lot has changed drastically in 3 years. So sometimes you can get some outside information, which at least gives you a little more to go off of than the dad who's standing in the driveway telling the child all the things he doesn't know about the roof and then thinking, you know, you got to get it looked at. So, and then there's kind of an in-between, which I've just heard rumor of, which is like, if there's 2 days worth of showings, can you let a roofer go by and look at it, or come to the showing? And you probably need permission if they scramble on the roof, but can they stand on the deck and see the whole roof of shingles and give the buyer some sense of something on it. And so that might be kind of you get the roof inspection while you're looking at the house anyways. I think that is fair, but if you should let the seller know if it pushes beyond this family member or friend who's a roofer came along and stood on the deck happily and looked at it with me. So you might pull that off.
I know, Ben, you do pre-inspections. We do pre-inspections. Do you have some stats or something that is good confirmation for how it gives you better contracts up front? You get more money. Because I think a lot of times there's an assumption that there's a certain amount of things that are wrong that once an inspection is done, you find out they're not. And people put prices on values on repairs much higher than what the cost is to actually have them repaired. So we find that doing a pre-inspection that we pay for ourselves, we don't get reimbursed from the client. Some agents do that and then get reimbursed at the end, which is fine. We find that doing that helps with the seller knowledge of the house. Removes a lot of fear of that, the transaction process and the way that the offers look. Do you have some stats or some advice to Jackie on? Jackie, you're getting a private coaching here by a team of people, so you're fortunate. Do you have some way to explain that to her and what your thinking is and the benefit?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just moving spaces. I do know there was a time last year that of 34 pre-inspected listings in a row, only 3 of them did the winning buyer have their own home inspection. And that was last year when we didn't hit as crazy as it is.
Yeah.
So that's like 87% of the time a pre-inspected listing does not have the buyer conduct their own home inspection. That's why I'm such a big advocate of it.
Yeah.
For this year, I'd have to go back and look. I almost wonder if I'm at, maybe in January, I had a listing that had the buyer inspection following a pre-inspection, but I've just come to terms with it that if I do a pre-inspection and we fix a few things, we never, ever, ever have to talk about repairs again.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, the dirty little secret benefit to the realtor is the work's done up front and then you accept the offer and then you just give a few updates and it takes a few minutes a week and then you close and then life goes on. Yeah. I do think pre-inspected listings, and I'm telling sellers this, are even more valuable than ever, because if the rules say you can't have a home inspection to buy a house right now, the buyer can give up their home inspection like they're going to have to do anywhere, but at least on your home, they get all the same information and they didn't actually give up the information. So, because I've had a few sellers this year say, well, do I even need to mess with that? I just heard buyers just buy them. And that's not exactly totally true, but it is a lot of the time, we know that, but I just think it's a real gift to have the pre-inspected listing. And it's more valuable to a buyer because there's a ton of nice families who really don't want to buy a house without an inspection, but they know they have to. Well, at least they can come by ours, and it might make it more valuable in the marketplace because you get all the information even though you gave it up and you didn't have to pay for it. So I don't know. That's the stat, 31 of 34 last year. But when it comes to putting dollar figures on repair items and things, I don't know how to answer that, I guess. So if you ask it again, I might be able to answer it better, but Rhonda has a question.
No, I don't have a question. I was just going to say, I don't have nearly the stats that Ben does, but I also do pre-inspections and I pay for them myself. I have never had a listing where the buyer has asked for an inspection, but I use it mostly, well, not mostly, but part of the reason I use it, a pre-inspection, is it's part of my, justifying my 6% or whatever my commission would be. I have a big conversation with my sellers about why it's a good idea to have a pre-inspection and why I'm paying for it. But again, that's just part of my value add. But I've never had anyone on any of my listings come back and ask for an inspection, even before this year when it was not as it is
Right.
today.
I kind of hope once there's a little reprieve and there's a little sense of normalcy, one thing that hangs around is buyers have inspections and that comes back, but then for quite a while after that, it still maintains a take it or leave it inspection. I don't know like exactly when it was decided that a buyer gets to just totally trash a seller and make them fix all sorts of crazy things, or I won't buy your used house that's existed for 95 years. But just along the way, it's like, I mean, if you go buy a used car, you just buy it with all the dings on it and that's what the car is. So that's my own secret hope is we get back to inspections, but then you just buy it or you don't. I mean, just even 6 years ago, the sales that fall apart over some flaking paint up on the 3rd floor dormer that were just going to require the firefighter to climb up there. And it's like $2,000 for $10 worth of paint because it's just such a painstaking process. And buyers would demand you go paint this little piece of trim that you're never going to be able to touch. It's so high up in the air. Oh, sale fell apart. So I just kind of hope at least we've retrained to have a sensible view of the condition of the home. Doesn't have to be perfect. As long as it's pretty good, you can take care of those other stuff. Does anyone think, I mean, am I crazy to hope we just do take it and leave it inspections for like the next 10 years?
Yeah,
That'd be great. Wouldn't that be great? You
I
know,
like what he said about the sensible view of the home.
when I represent a buyer or a seller, I'll say, you know, before the inspection, I'll say that the realtor, the listing realtor, did their homework in advance and based their price on the condition, including the 35-year-old furnace, the 10-year-old water heater. Because again, we're talking days before now. But it used to be like the buyer, we get that inspection report and the buyer would want the seller to fix everything. And I'm like, well, no, they pretty much priced it accordingly, typically, usually.
Mhm.
So I'm right there with you. Yeah. And back
Yeah,
by,
but Tim,
yeah,
that's assuming that the realtor has been trained
I
to
agree with
see
that.
that. And there's a problem with our industry that people are not getting the training they need. So they don't understand that, or they're not effectively communicating to their buyers that information.
Yes, that is very
Sorry,
true.
just
No, you're absolutely right.
soapbox.
That's true. That's only assuming that it's a level playing field,
Yeah.
which it isn't always. So, and back to the conversation about pre-inspections, because yes, I do pre-inspections on almost all my listings. And in this market, I haven't had anybody then do another inspection.
Right.
In past markets, I did. And that's also why I only do pre-inspections if I'm confident it's going to be a multiple offer situation. If I like that $2.8 million house that we have, we didn't do a pre-inspection on that. And whoever buys that house is going to have their own inspection. And so why would I waste my money? Same thing with the Offutt mansion that we listed over here in Midtown. It was an amazing historic home. And I knew it would be a good sale, but I wasn't going to spend $1,000 having that thing pre-inspected because I knew somebody else wasn't going to trust it. So it's case by case, to be honest.
Yeah,
True.
that's very
Rhonda,
true.
you pay for them up front, right? Instead of getting it reimbursed. My fear is I want agents to jump on board with pre-inspections. I think it helps all of us. If more agents jump in and then more agents say, and I pay for it up front, you don't even have to worry about the cost. It'll force me to then have to do that as well. And I just kind of rather save my money and pay it at the end. Can I ask, have you felt like that just is like the little extra tweak of the justification in the commission, maybe that they don't even have to spend $1 on it? Or did you never did it any other way? I'm just curious.
I've always done it that way. And I guess I put quite a bit of emphasis on that, just so that they know what a big deal it is. And they've always been, very appreciative of it. But no, I've always just done it that way. I've played around with the idea of having them pay for it and then writing it in that I would reimburse them at closing, because I know some agents do that. But I just haven't gone to that just yet.
Okay.
I've always done it that way, and we've paid it up front, but I like the idea that I have more money on the table than they do. I like to be ahead of the game as far as the bank account is concerned, that they see that we are in, I mean, and I talk about this, that we're investing up front, whether your house sells or not, or whether, you know, anything happens here, we're investing up front. That's kind of our earnest money into it. But I don't do that. And that's one of the ways that we get a contract signed pretty early is I tell them, as soon as we have the signed contract, then we have permission to represent you. We can order a home inspection on your behalf and set up the, we also pay for $100 for a staging consult. You know, and of course the pictures and Matterport, all those things. So we have not done a listing that was less than 6%. I don't even know how long it's been, other than one that we did at 6%, and we got the buyer, and we had told the seller, you know, that if we did that right away, we would cut it by 1%. But we just don't have to. We don't have to fight over commissions. So
I have one last quick question, so now we're getting ready to end. What is your all's opinion on radon mitigation systems?
Ben,
I don't
take it
think I've
away.
had a, oh, go ahead.
No, I said, Ben, you.
Oh, I just was going to say, I've not had a buyer test for that in probably 250 transactions. I mean, which is like, I mean, maybe 200, like into the 2 years ago type of time.
Oh, because in Lincoln, it is like the hot thing, and everybody has high radon. So then everybody has to get a radon mitigation system. Like, it's ridiculous. The last 3 homes I sold that I owned, oh, it's the first thing.
I mean, it used to be, I mean, the concern hasn't gone away that it's in the soil. Like, we haven't transformed our soil in 2 years. I just think buyers say, as soon as I check that box, they can throw my offer in the trash, because the next buyer is going to say, I'll just test it on my own. I'll put in the system on my own. I'm not going to lose this beautiful house over what may or may not exist in the soil. I'll just sort it out later.
It's just being dictated by the market, basically.
Totally. Because I used to say about half the buyers would test, and half would say that's just totally silly. I don't even believe in radon. But there was a whole half of people who did, and the market didn't say they couldn't test for it. So I think the market's just kind of eradicated it. And even the buyer who says, what if I just say I'll test, but I won't tell them the results and I'll fix it? I say, if that's how you really feel, why don't you just do it in like a month from now after you buy it? You know, that's my thought on that.
Yeah.
The other tweak is the termites, which we know obligate the seller to be responsible for termites, just like radon does if you test for it, but you have to test for termites. I've started having my buyers, if they could take a calculated risk, say buyer to be responsible for the cost of any termite treatment. Because most homes just don't have termite issues.
yeah,
We're not that termite heavy. And even if there's the $800 treatment. And if your offer is a little better from the next buyer because they didn't think of that. So I've had some buyers just say they pay for the test, which you have to do, and they'll pay for the treatment, which is like maybe 2 a year of 100. There even needs to be treatment. So it's like a real small calculated risk. And it's one thing less concerning to the buyer, or to the seller.
I love it. That's great.
Yeah.
are you still seeing, Jackie, in Lincoln, like the mitigation of the radon is a pretty much expected? Is that?
It just seems, I mean, I've been in Omaha now for about 1.5 years, but I mean, it was always, so when I sold my last house, of course, the first thing, you know, they wanted a radon test. I mean, it's always just been a big deal in Lincoln. It just is like, it's just what you always, I mean, and again, I don't know if the market has shifted more in Lincoln towards kind of how it is in Omaha, of maybe it not being as big of an issue, but it's just a really big deal. They come in and they put the thing in your basement and it sits there for a weekend, and they come back with the readings and, oh yeah, it's high. And then, you know, the seller ends up having to, well, I did at least, I think maybe one I worked out half and half, but I had to put it, you know, it's about $1,000 and to put the mitigation system in.
Yeah.
And it seems to be every house in Lincoln has high radon levels, every single one. I'm like, everybody just go ahead and put it in and be done with it, because it's not, you're going to get tagged for it. So, and it's the thing is here is I don't see people, people don't really seem to talk about it much, or like it's not an issue. So I don't know if it's just
not currently in this market, I think,
Yeah.
Jackie, that
Right.
it's just another point of contention that we don't want to have to have
Right.
the seller see as a risk. So the whole idea behind a buyer contract, in my mind, is to mitigate every bit of risk that you can for the seller, and at the same time, try to do that same thing as best as possible for yourself. So mitigation of risk is anything that could cause the contract to not go through to the other end. And that's just one other thing. So, and I know we have clients that would not ever buy a house without testing the radon, but now they understand, hey, it's important to me, we'll take care of it. So, and some people don't want to move into a house that it hasn't been tested or mitigated. So we write it up that way, that they are testing it, but they will have it done themselves. And it doesn't seem to be a problem for sellers once it's, that's stated. So
I think sellers have gotten a little greedy though. Like if you would say, I'm going to
Little?
test it, but I won't take care of it, or I won't even ask you to do it, sellers. A seller's like, who doesn't have that included? Just
Yeah.
like if you mark land
Yeah.
survey, it's
Yeah.
a $90 drawing. That means pretty much nothing. Oh, if they say they want a survey, I'm going to look for another offer.
yeah, right.
Because sellers are accustomed to, you'll ask me no questions about my home, which, I mean, I just had a seller say, should I be concerned they're conducting a survey? And I said, no, but I also knew no one else was going to conduct one. So if you want to take the cleanest offer, yeah, you could throw out that particular one because you're going to take a drawing of your yard. But I think sellers have just, again, gotten just used to
Yeah.
buyers get nothing that they want and I get everything I want. And
More.
anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very, very true. A little greedy, a lot greedy. Yeah, exactly. Well, anything else? Any other questions for Ben? Ben, this has been fantastic, and we're over the time, but this will be recorded, and then next week we'll make sure. And I noticed that Dana Poole is on the call, but she's just not on in the pictures. So we will talk with the whole class.
I'm sorry, we were doing a final walkthrough and now I'm driving.
It's
So,
okay.
sorry.
All right. So every Wednesday, 12 to 1, this will be on everybody's calendar. We'll make sure that you guys have the information so that you know. So thanks, Kristen, for joining us. And Tim, you're not muted, but there's no sound.
Don't know why. There
Oh,
we
that
are.
was interesting.
Yeah. Thank
Do you
you.
have any last minute things?
No, this was great. I know it's a small group, but it was a good one. Ben, thank you so much. You are the busiest realtor in our company. You do the most transactions, and you're the one that gives the most. So
Yes.
it's pretty awesome. So we really appreciate that.
Teacher's
Well, I'll
heart.
keep it up. That's my hope.
All right. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah. Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
Ben.
Yeah.
I learned a lot from you today too.
Oh, cool.
I always
I'm
do.
glad.
Don't you?
Yep,
It's
so
great.
thank you.
Yeah.
Great.
Thanks, Kristen. And Kristen, you'll be here in 2 weeks. No, in a week.
Next week, next
Next week
Wednesday.
is-
Purchase agreement.
it's
CMAs.
Yeah. Yes. CMAs.
We'll get more people to the party. So
Yeah.
thanks,
Okay.
Yeah.
everybody.
Thanks, you guys.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye
Great.
bye.